The ending of My Hero Academia had me confused when it came to the fans and their opinions on why they thought it was bad. Honestly, I sat there wondering why people disliked or hated it so much. For some of it, I can understand why people dislike it, but was it really all that bad? The main things I keep seeing are that people think Deku got robbed because he's powerless, or because he ended the series with no girlfriend, or that they think he's not the number one hero, and a bunch of other things that just sound off about why the ending of the series was bad. And I'll talk about what I thought was good and bad in this video and then give my opinion on the end of the series itself. Let me start by saying that I definitely had some gripes with the ending. Why? Because I felt like Deku's final smash 1000% should have been the most impactful smash that we've ever seen in the series. And to this day, there are at least 4 or 5 others that are still arguably better from an impact standpoint. For example, the overhaul fight, All Might vs Nomu, All Might vs All for One, and even Deku vs Muscular and the Gear Shift final smash that we see versus Shigaraki. In my opinion, it felt like Horikoshi wanted to end off with a bang when it came to Deku vs All for One's final fight, but it didn't give it that consistent flair or the emotional hit that it normally does when it comes to larger scale fights in the series. Take my examples from earlier. However, from an overall standpoint, it was something that could still be enjoyed, and I understand why Horikoshi himself may have loved that ending, and it's totally understandable for an author to slip in something not necessarily meant for the fans to enjoy. And I find that to be okay because the author should love his content even if it upsets the fans. Now that's not to say it should ruin it for the fans for the sake of their enjoyment, but the point is you can't please everyone. The main thing I see people whining and complaining about is the fact that Deku is quirkless, which to be honest I think is stupid, and I can't really be sorry if that hurts your feelings. I have my own theory to suggest that he still has one for all, but I'll save that for another time. To explain more why I think that complaint is stupid is more because the people that have complaints about this I feel either can't read or don't care about the narrative when it comes to the writing. Because from the get-go, we're introduced to the idea of, can you be a hero without a quirk? That right there, from the beginning, opened the door to a possible ending where Deku might end up quirkless again. Emphasis on the word possible. The way Horikoshi wrote Deku and All Might's stories together made the story of My Hero so much more impactful for those two personally. We're introduced to a 4-year-old Deku who was convinced he was worthless because he couldn't be like everyone else. People talked down on him constantly, he had no real friends to call his own, and his only supporter was his mother at the time. Quirks were so ingrained into the society that it was less common and a bit abnormal to be a powerless human, and All Might, who had it all, the power, the looks, the love, the credibility, and the support from everyone, had a much easier time. And a lot of people don't realize that both of their stories start really when they have that conversation on the rooftop. We find out how disgruntled and negative All Might truly is, and how mentally driven Deku is to prove the world wrong, despite how down in the dumps he is. Over time, we see their roles shift from All Might being the role model for the world and Deku to living in that spotlight himself. Both characters overcoming issues that the other dealt with in their time and learning how to walk in the other's shoes. All Might, who used to be confident and teased Deku for being emotional and whiny, became emotional and worrisome himself as he saw Deku taking on the weight of the world the same way he himself, as the number one hero, used to do the same. Deku, while still being a crybaby at times, had to learn what it means to wear the number one hero title, and why it's a bad thing to wear the symbol of peace alone. Both have learned so much more as the story went along, with All Might figuring out how to be a hero with no powers, after being the most prominent one to shut down Deku in the beginning for wanting to know how to be exactly that, and realizing how to rely on and learn from his students. Meanwhile, Deku learned how to better connect with his classmates, share the weight of the world, and eventually realizing that sometimes you can't in fact save the bad guy, while completing the objective that his predecessor couldn't at the time. When you look at My Hero Academia under a lens, you start to realize that even other students and other teachers have had their own stories that started around the same time as Deku's and eventually came full circle. A lot of it happening before the end of My Hero Academia at that. Endeavor, who I feel is the best written character in the series, started off being one of the most hated characters in the story, to having changed his public perception and personal life perception. But the point I'm making here is that Horikoshi has made pretty much everyone's story come full circle, as did Deku and All Might. To get more into what I felt about the ending, I think the ending is generally good. If you think it's bad, you'd honestly have to give me more than, well, Deku was powerless at the end, or he didn't end up with this girl, he's a teacher, blah blah blah. Deku and All Might's write-ups were great, all things considered. A good bit of the side characters flourished, even though there was some that suffered from not having extra character development that was needed. To be fair though, this happens a lot in popular series, and that doesn't make it a good thing. I'm just noting that it happens a good bit, so we should give it a bit of fair criticism. Deku still got everything he wanted from a hero perspective. All of his friends are safe, his mother is safe, still trying to find out where his dad is. His influence has trickled down even to his friends that have united the public and accomplished other things. The friend who treated him like garbage finally acknowledged his wrongs and changed. He changed All Might's fate despite what Night Eye said in the beginning. He became not only a hero, but a greater hero than his mentors. And in the end, he became All Might's hero. And it's kind of funny when you think about it, he became All Might's role model and hero in a few different ways. I have a video that I'm working on for that coming soon. He and All Might were both eventually heroes without a quirk, again, making the narrative for them come full circle. Deku gaining All Might's suit, in my opinion, is not the worst thing, and it's especially not really worse than him having One for All anymore because it holds so much more meaning and it still gives him One for All in a sense. While he doesn't have the vestiges anymore, each ability represents someone close to him, and it's funny when you really think deep into it because we always saw All Might's vestige not fully manifested, but everything All Might stood for in the end ended up in that suit. So honestly, the way I look at it is, even though All Might can't be out there fighting with him, the suit will forever be a reminder of him and can make him even feel like All Might is still fighting alongside him and his friends the same way the vestiges did when he had One for All. He became who he always wanted to be and a bit more. Again, as I mentioned before, I feel like a lot was left off the table with Horikoshi not making the final smash the biggest and most impactful that we've seen, even though it was cool to see All for One explode and fly everywhere for the last punch. But that and him being powerless shouldn't really take too much away from the fact that he accomplished everything he set out to do as the main character of the series. I will say though, if it wasn't for the way All for One came back towards the end, I probably would have hated the way he went out versus Bakugo. His character seemed to go from this all-intelligent tactician to madman to overly emotional, lonely old man, and while he always had a lust for power, it didn't seem all the way fitting for a character who was just evil from the jump. By comparison, I enjoyed Sukuna from Jujutsu Kaisen, largely because he was never a villain that needed to be understood and he didn't require understanding. He just was evil incarnate. And because he was just evil, I enjoyed what he did to the fullest. I enjoyed it more as he came across anyone who threatened to challenge him and his being at a certain level. If Sukuna started to develop a heart or sympathy, etc. late in the series, my love for the character would have started to go down. But to each his own. I've seen all the jokes about Deku not ending up with Uraka and him becoming a teacher, etc. But to be honest, I personally don't care about him not ending up with her. Would it have been a nice touch? Yes, for sure, considering how they were built up and implied to want to confess those feelings for one another. But it is what it is, honestly, and I can understand why people dislike that one part of the ending. Deku also becoming a teacher was something I feel like everyone could have guessed would happen. He's the most knowledgeable in the verse, all things hero related. He's one of the best battle strategists in the series, and what else is he going to do with all those notes, honestly, right? One of the best things to do with that knowledge is to impart it to others. He's only learned more by becoming a hero, so it's not really too crazy to think that he ended up teaching as well. I don't know why people had such a gripe about him becoming a teacher, but it is what it is. Other things that I did enjoy and some other things that I had gripes about were that all the students went on to become better and even some of them became teachers themselves. Characters like Oyama, Endeavor, and even Bakugo had great endings to their individual stories, and I love the way that they were written. But also what I thought was cool but upset me was that it had somewhat of an Avengers Endgame type of ending, but none of the cameo characters really did much of anything. So we saw appearances like Astro from Barrage, he makes an appearance. We see Koichi from Vigilantes, he makes an appearance, and some of the movie characters make appearances also. But they kind of just stand there, you know, we see them and then like they don't really interact. And while we got Koichi from Vigilantes, Knuckle Duster didn't make an appearance. Despite how iconic he is to Vigilantes, I think that was like a heavy miss. While some might say the Knuckle Duster bit is a small gripe, in my opinion, these were all missed opportunities to make a heavier hitting ending where the world of heroes could come together and end All for One, since he was operating on a global scale and doing this for a very long time. I don't think it would have taken anything from Deku or the class to have had this happen either, as since it was kind of all hands on deck for everybody and fight or flight, to be completely honest. All of this being done to put down the greatest villain in their history. So I feel like they could have done a bit more with those cameo characters to make them feel a bit more involved. One more thing I hear people upset about, and this is more understandable, is that characters didn't die like fans thought they should. And I don't know how to tell some of you this, but Bakugo was never really meant to die. So the ones that hate him for some reason or just wanted his death to happen when it was clear he was going to come back, womp womp. This might not be a take you want to hear, but his story with Deku was supposed to continue on. They were supposed to be close friends in the end, and it's a part of the point of their friendship progression. And a lot of times, mangakas don't kill off this number 2 protag. Vegeta is alive, Sasuke is alive, so on and so forth. Pick a name of a series out of a hat. But others like Edgeshot, All Might, Dabi, even Endeavor being alive in situations where they shouldn't be, I didn't really agree with, because I think sometimes death can happen to further another character's progression, and that's okay to happen. I'm going to preface this with just saying that this is completely my opinion, and I don't really care how bad or good you think it is. I just want to use this as an example. But I feel like at a point, Endeavor had the perfect moment for a send-off. Same for All Might, and while there's reasons for both of them to definitely live on, them having deaths at a point could have made the series much more meaningful, much more of an emotional thing for fans to grab onto. Yes, I know Dabi doesn't have much time to live, he's still alive, but this doesn't really take from my point here. Endeavor dying when Dabi was about to explode would have been fine in my opinion, because he had already done enough to change his public perception and to some degree his family's perception. I hoped at the time he flew off with Dabi into the atmosphere with the last bit of his strength and just let him explode, killing them both while apologizing to Dabi for all that he had done to him as they flew away. While this doesn't right his wrongs completely with Dabi, it's a thing that would have shown the world that he wasn't hiding from his responsibilities, that he truly cared about protecting everyone as the anointed number 1 hero. In the spiritual sense, he could have lived on with Dabi in the afterlife if you believe in that sort of thing. To me, that's much better than him watching his son die and his last living moments being not able to do much of anything about it but watch him rage as they attempt to break through to his heart until the inevitable comes. Even if you don't agree with what I just said, the point is that some characters could have died and it wouldn't have taken away from how good the story is. It would have honestly made it somewhat better. All in all, I'd rate My Hero out of a 10, a smooth 8 out of 10. It's definitely not the most perfect series ever. It's not the most perfect story ever. It does not have the greatest writing ever, nor does it have the greatest anything ever. But I do appreciate the way Horikoshi writes impactful and emotional moments. I appreciate the way that he starts stories with characters and ends them very well. And he also connects them very well between the writing that he does for other characters' stories. He's made characters like All Might and Endeavor some of my most favorite fictional characters ever. And if there was a sequel, I would definitely pick it up. I'm still in the process of reading Vigilantes as I make this. I feel like My Hero is a good starter series for someone who likes things like battle shonens, or even someone who just may enjoy stories where you find characters that are more relatable to their own personalities. So even despite things like My Hero having a really strange fandom, the story itself is a good read, to be completely honest. I'd really appreciate hearing how you guys thought of the ending of My Hero or about the series overall. I do enjoy reading your opinions, and again, I understand why some people didn't enjoy it, but those are more to the folks who have more sensible reasons than others. But please leave your opinions about the series down below, and if there's anything else you'd like me to cover about the series, please include that also. As always, thanks for watching, and I do want to thank you all as I approach 1,000 subs.